So we've had the first week of footy finally back, and already there's so many headlines after just one round of footy. The big one, Mary McGregor, what is his future at the Dragons? After the game on the weekend, he said, I'm only 3 weeks into a 2-year deal, whatever it might be, so you shouldn't judge me yet. But Liam, surely he's had so long at the club that it's time to really evaluate his future there.
Yeah, you would like to think so. After a performance like that against the Warriors team that really the Dragons should have been putting probably 20 or 30 points of, and we managed not to score any at all. The Warriors were fantastic. You have to give credit to them, but the Dragons were extremely disappointing. And with the roster that they've got, it does have to come back to McGregor. He's just not able to get enough out of the players that he's got in his roster. You've got half a dozen Origin players there. You've got some good young forwards, some good young outside backs as well. But yeah, the 2 games into a 3-year deal comment is a little bit confusing considering he's been there since 2014. But that's the way he's looking at it, so play on.
He's obviously made a lot of changes this weekend for the team. Corey Norman's gone back to fullback. Matt Duffy axed completely from the squad. Brought in Adam Clune. One change that we were looking at that we were really surprised at, Tyrell Fuimaono, completely gone from the 17 as well. He was arguably their best player in the first 2 rounds. Do you think this is him making these changes because he knows his job's on the line?
Oh, yeah, he surely knows that his days are numbered, even though we have a few easy games, quote unquote, that we should be winning. He's decided to put Corey Norman back to fullback, which, I don't know, he's played fullback before last season, didn't set the world on fire, had an absolute stinker of a game, to be honest, on Saturday against the Warriors. Ben Hunt popped a lot of the flack on Saturday, but then I think it was Nathan Brown, former Knights coach, not current Eels player Nathan Brown, came out and he just gave it to Corey Norman, which was new because it's usually Ben Hunt popping all the flack. And as you touched on, Tyrell is a very strange omission after he played the first 2 games, big minutes, played really well, and then on the weekend played 15 minutes when the game was pretty much all but over, and now he's been axed.
I was going to say, Liam, do you reckon there's a chance possibly that Mary, as his nuclear option, should maybe possibly put Ben Hunt as the hooker and push McInnes back to lock? I know that sounds like badness. That's pushing your best player out of his preferred position. But
yeah, exactly. Ben Hunt, if he was playing hooker at another club, would probably be one of the best hookers in the competition. We've seen how well he's played there for Queensland. He's played a little bit there for Australia as well. So he's obviously a very good dummy half, a better dummy half than he is a halfback. But he's still not the best hooker at the club. So I wouldn't be moving Cameron McInnes anywhere.
What about the stories or the mention? I think it was Spud Carroll overnight said Josh Reynolds could be the answer in the halves for the Dragons. Well, as a Dragons fan, what do you think of that one?
Josh Reynolds is not the answer. I love Josh Reynolds. That's a player. He broke the drought in New South Wales in Origin. He's had a fantastic career, really, but I think he's played like 20 NRL games in the past 2.5 years. I don't think he's the answer. We've got good halves there on paper. They're just not performing to the standard. To put things in perspective about Paul McGregor, he's been at the Dragons for the same amount of time as Michael Maguire spent at South Sydney before he was sacked. Michael Maguire made 3 prelim finals and won a premiership. Paul McGregor has won 1 finals game.
I think that's a pretty good way to summarise it. And Danksy, you're saying that there's a board meeting coming up where his future could be decided a bit?
Yeah, so June 16th, so we've still got to get 3 games against the Bulldogs and Cronulla, I believe. 2 winnable games, maybe. But his future will, if he is still coach then, will almost certainly be decided. Again, he's on a lot of money, $750,000 a year. It'll cost, apparently, according to the Morning Herald, about $1 million to terminate his contract. It's a lot of money, but then, if you can't recruit anyone for 2021, 2022, maybe it's worth it.
Does the fact that if they want to sack him now and the payout, and we know that we haven't had footy for 2 months, and a lot of clubs, and I'm guessing the Dragons as much as anyone, coming under some pretty hardcore financial hardships, is that going to be a factor whether they keep him just because they can't afford to pay him a payout?
I don't know if they can. I mean, they could afford it, but you think you go, all right, well, what's the extra $250,000 versus us not being able to be a competitive side for the next 2-3 years. I mean, you look at even just a report today of Moses Sully possibly not now going from Manly to join the Dragons. You got to get game breakers there, and then what are you going to do? They clearly don't want to play for Mary.
The other thing is, I suppose Flano's there. People have been talking about Wayne Bennett maybe stepping in. It's not as if he's there because there's no other coaches that can take his spot. Like, there are guys are in and around the game, former coaches as well. Jeff Tuvey, I don't know what he's doing, but there are guys that would step in for sure.
Is James Shepherd still there as an assistant coach?
Yeah, he's an assistant coach with Flano at the Dragons at the moment. You've got guys like Jason Riles and Craig Fitzgibbon at other clubs that are assistant coaches and learning under some of the best coaches in the game. So I don't think they could do any worse than what we've got at the moment.
But also, it sucks to be holding the axe above somebody's head. From all reports, Mary's a pretty great bloke. And there's always the whole Ben Hunt jet ski thing, which I think earns you like a fair bit of leeway in kind of any contract negotiation, but apparently not.
Well, I don't think this will be anywhere near the end of this story. I think there's all these different parts coming out of it. As you mentioned, this board meeting, lots of talk about this St. George versus Illawarra. Like, the Steelers, people are strong behind Mary, and then the St. George side is the one that wants him out. So I think that board meeting in 2 weeks is going to be a big deciding factor for his future. But there are a couple of other coaches that we're going to talk about, because it's not just Mary who has been in the press lately. Dean Pay is another big one at the Bulldogs, who people say he's only been handed a few weeks to turn the side around, essentially, and there's only so much he can do with the squad that he has at the moment. BB, did you see much of the Bulldogs game on the weekend, and what do you think the Bulldogs should be doing with Dean Pay?
Bulldogs, it was a similar story to the Dragons. They were just all over the shop. And like the Dragons, the two halves, Lachlan Lewis and Jack Cogger, copped a lot of heat for just not being able to create anything. They've got a pretty good forward pack that was putting in a pretty good shift and just not getting anything out of it. Obviously, Kieran Foran comes back this weekend, which you would hope alleviates some of that bit of creativity, bit of experience in the halves there. But, like you say, if it doesn't, what then? Dean Pay hasn't been dealt the easiest of hands or the best of hands, but there comes a time when the board and the fans are going to start getting really restless, and it could be sooner rather than later.
Maybe the Bulldogs should get more edge back rowers. I think they've only got 15 or 16 of them.
Maybe they should get Josh Reynolds back.
I think it's a good idea.
Look, I think they ended the season well last year when Kieran Foran was playing. And if you look on paper, I think that they're a pretty fair chance of beating the Dragons next Monday, just on the complete mess that the club's in at the moment down in Wollongong. Kieran Foran coming back into that side makes them look like a pretty competitive team on paper. And we know that the Bulldogs, they're always going to have a bit of heart. So a bit of class in the halves isn't going to hurt them.
The pre-season absolute nightmare with Corey Harawira-Naera and Jaden Okunbor. Sponsors running away. Apparently, sponsors not wanting to join. The whole drama. I mean, surely that has to play into. I know it was 2-3 months ago now, but when two of your probably guys in your starting side are cut just a couple of weeks ahead of the competition starting, it's pretty rough as well.
I was going to say, the thing with Dean Pay is he's obviously inherited a poor squad, but what people forget is that he hasn't been able to go out and really sign anyone until next season because of the mess that Des Hasler left the club in financially with back-ended deals and whatnot. Kieran Foran on $1 million. Greg Eastwood was on $800,000 last year, and he was playing reserve grade for a lot of the time. I think that Dean Pay, if he doesn't perform next year with a bit better roster, hopefully for the club, then maybe it might be time to look elsewhere. But I think for this season, his job should probably be safe.
Well, I think on that, one of the interesting things that a lot of the talk about coaches is that they haven't been able to get the squad they wanted, or something else has come up in the off-season or the pre-season. And especially this year, we've seen a lot of interruptions to the rugby league season. And one coach that was probably under threat in January and February if he didn't get results this year, but is now no longer under threat, is Stephen Kearney. Now, BB, Warriors fan, great win on the weekend. But do you think Stephen Kearney has a bit of a free run this year now, considering that all that's been thrown at the Warriors, that there's not necessarily anything expected of them, so whatever he does achieve will be just considered a bonus?
Yeah, certainly. And, the way we started the season, the first 2 rounds before the shutdowns, the pressure was already on. 2 losses, 6 points in 2 games, and virtually, no highlights out of those first 2 games. But you go into a lockdown period, all the pressure does come off. It's almost like the Warriors literally have nothing to lose, and they go out and sort of play like they did on the weekend. 46 completed sets, NRL history record, I think. So I think, I do think he'll be given a little bit of leeway for the rest of this year. He's signed until the end of next year as well. So certainly the pressure that he was under about 2.5 months ago definitely come off over the past little while.
So Kearney has sort of benefited from this extra break where the Warriors have been thrown in over here to Australia. They got so much going against them. But on the reverse side of that, there are a couple of clubs who potentially people expect the break would have benefited them, getting players back from injury, getting more cohesion in key combinations. One of those is the Cronulla Sharks, but they now find themselves 0-3 to start the season. Danksy, do you think John Morris is under threat at all?
Not particularly, especially because of the age of the side. As everyone knows, Bomber had a long history in the pathways with a lot of these guys. So he's brought them up as academy kids from they were 13, 14 years old. He's insanely popular amongst the group. And they going on the first 2 rounds, they lost to the Rabbitohs on the last pass of the game. They were beating the Storm and then threw it away on a silly penalty. They are 0-3 and they were quite ordinary by their own admission on the weekend against West Tigers, but I don't think it's as bad as it looks. Are they a top forward side? Probably not, but I think they can certainly still turn it around a little bit.
One other team we've sort of put a question mark over, that a coach that has a lot more time but will need to start turning results around, is Justin Holbrook and the Titans. Liam, I'm not sure how much you saw of that Titans performance against the Cowboys, but they didn't offer too much to excite people. What do you think Justin Holbrook needs to do, and what does he need to achieve by the end of the season to have confidence in him to keep his job?
I really don't know how much there is Justin Holbrook can do, because the roster that he's got and that he's inherited, we speak about coaches not having rosters they want. I'm sure he doesn't want the Titans roster at the moment, and that's no disrespect to the guys that are there, but it's just hard to attract players to a club that for so long have been so poorly performing on the field. Jai Arrow's off to the Rabbitohs next year. AJ Brimson is out pretty much for the whole season with that back injury. And outside of that, they've got key players like Bryce Cartwright, Tyrone Peachy, Ash Taylor, who are in and out of the side, chopping and changing positions, underperforming. It's not an easy task for Justin Holbrook, and he's going to have a lot of pressure on him because, as we spoke about, they are owned by the NRL, and when they're not performing, that's where the drama comes from.
Okay, to finish up for each of you, first coach to get the chop this year, who's it going to be?
3, 2, 1. Mary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got to be Paul. I'm praying.
You don't. I thought I heard you saying Craig Bellamy before, BB. Now that they've had one loss.
No, I'm saying that people are writing off the Storm, and Craig Bellamy's got a point to prove. He's absolutely under no pressure. But Craig Bellamy, he's going to fire those guys up. I think it was Gus Gould came out and said, he's basically writing Melbourne Storm off, which you can't, because you can never write off a Craig Bellamy side unless it's the New South Wales side.
Oof, yeah, they're painful memories.